It could be something that would draw him closer to God, something that would refine his character and deepen his faith. Job hadn't considered that his pain could be part of a larger process, something that could shape his future and bring him closer to the heart of God. Elihu's wisdom didn't offer all the answers, but it gave Job a new framework through which to view his suffering. It helped him understand that, even in the midst of his pain, there was a greater plan at work, a plan that God was unfolding in ways Job couldn't yet see. Elihu's words sparked something in Job, a renewed sense of hope. Even though the answers to his questions were still elusive, Job now saw that there was more to the story. His suffering wasn't meaningless. There was purpose in it. God was at work, even when Job couldn't understand why. Sometimes, all we need in our own struggles is a new perspective. We need to hear something different, a fresh outlook that helps us see beyond our immediate pain. Elihu's words helped Job shift his focus from his own suffering to the bigger picture of God's plan. Sometimes, we too need to be reminded that God is at work in our lives, even when we can't see it. Our pain is not in vain. It is part of a larger process, one that may eventually lead us to greater growth, greater understanding, and a deeper relationship with God. God speaks to Job. Questions from the whirlwind. Job pondered Elihu's words, and as he continued to search for answers, something extraordinary happened. Just when it seemed that his suffering couldn't get any worse, a mighty whirlwind began to roar. The winds howled, and the earth trembled beneath Job's feet, and from the heart of the whirlwind came a voice like thunder, a voice that shook Job to his core. It was the voice of God. Can you imagine the awe, the terror, and the wonder that Job must have felt in that moment? He had been questioning God, asking why his suffering had been allowed to unfold. But instead of answering his questions with simple explanations, God came to Job in a whirlwind and asked him a series of questions. The questions weren't about Job's suffering. They were about God's greatness and his power and his wisdom. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" God asked. "Tell me if you understand." With each question, God revealed the immensity of his creation, the depth of his knowledge, and the vastness of his wisdom. Job had been so consumed with his own pain and confusion that he had lost sight of the bigger picture, the grandeur of God's creation, the greatness of his plan, and the vastness of his understanding. God's questions weren't meant to mock Job or to scold him for his doubts. They were meant to help Job see the bigger picture. Job had been asking, "Why me? Why now?" But God was showing him that there was so much more to the world than his immediate suffering. There were mysteries beyond human understanding, things that only God could comprehend. Job had been focusing on his own pain, but God was inviting him to look at the world through a different lens, one that saw beyond the pain to the wonder of his creation and the greatness of his plan. In that moment, Job realized something profound. Even though he couldn't understand why he was suffering, he could trust that the creator of the universe, who had designed and sustained everything, was in control. Job had been so focused on his pain that he had forgotten the greatness of God's wisdom and power. But now, through God's questions, Job's perspective shifted. He saw that even though he couldn't see the full picture, God was still sovereign, and his plan was unfolding perfectly. Job's heart was humbled, and he began to see his suffering in a new light, not as meaningless, but as part of God's grand design. God restores Job a new beginning. After Job humbly accepted God's wisdom and acknowledged the limits of his understanding, something incredible happened. God restored everything Job had lost. His wealth was doubled, his health was renewed, and he was blessed with more children, children who would bring him joy and comfort. But the restoration was not just about getting back what he had lost. It was about the growth and transformation that had taken place within Job's heart. Through his trials, Job had developed a deeper understanding of God's character and a faith that was stronger than ever before. Job's restoration teaches us that, even in the midst of suffering, God's plans are good. Job's trials had refined him, shaping his character and deepening his relationship with God. When we face hardship, we may not always understand why, but we can trust that God is using the pain to shape us and to bring us closer to Him. Job didn't just regain what he had lost. He emerged from his trials with a newfound wisdom and a stronger faith. His story is a testimony to the power of holding on to God, even when everything else seems to be falling apart. The blessings Job received after his suffering were not just physical. They were spiritual, emotional, and relational. Job's relationship with God was deeper than it had ever been before, and his faith was unshakable. Job's story teaches lessons on faith and patience. His story, although ancient, speaks to us today. It speaks to the struggles we face, the doubts we wrestle with, and the pain we endure. Job reminds us that God sees our struggles and is with us, even when we can't feel it. Job's life shows us that faith is not just about receiving blessings, but about trusting God, even in the darkest of times. It's about holding on to faith when life doesn't make sense. Job teaches us patience, strength, and perseverance. He shows us that faith is not a fair-weather friend. It's there for us in our hardest moments, helping us endure when we don't have all the answers. Job's story invites us to trust in God's plan, even when we can't see the bigger picture. Why faith matters? Job's example of true strength is a powerful example of what true faith resembles. Job's faith wasn't rooted in his blessings. It was rooted in his trust in God's goodness. Even when everything was taken from him, Job continued to believe that God was good. His faith became the anchor that held him steady in the storm, and it carried him through the darkest days of his life. Faith, as Job demonstrates, is not about having it all figured out. It's about trusting God even when we don't understand why things are happening. It's about holding on when everything around us is falling apart. Job's life encourages us to build our own faith, remembering that God is faithful, even when we can't see it. His story inspires us to trust God no matter what, knowing that His plans are always for our good. Job's faith lasted through the good times and the bad, and his perseverance through suffering is a reminder that faith is not just about receiving blessings. It's about trusting God in every season of life. Conclusion: Job's story is a journey of faith and strength. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Job's life teaches us that faith is powerful, even in the hardest times. It's about trusting in God's plan, even when we don't have all the answers. If Job's story has encouraged you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others who may need a little hope and faith today. Remember, no matter what you're facing, God is with you, and He has a plan for every season of your life.